this is Faith and Books. How are you doing? I have finished 2 books this week, so I thought I would review them. And then since September is just around the corner, I thought I'd talk about what I plan to do in September, which I've sort of talked about before. Things just keep getting shoved because I'm being so slow, or I'm reading things that I hadn't planned to read. So things are getting shoved into the future. But the first book that I want to review is Nature's Best Hope by Doug Tallamy. And I don't want to go to as soon as I'm done talking about it, I'll go to the front page of it. But this was actually for Sustainability July. And I read, I think it was 67% of it in July, and then life got hectic and we were getting ready for our vacation. And I was doing vacation Bible school at my church, and that was all consuming for a week and stuff like that. So I just sort of dropped the ball on it. But it's a very good read. So his premise is that we need to change the way we view our lawns, LAWNS, because we are just all the development and the higher population. Our parks aren't enough to sustain species, and the little bits of green spaces that we have in our suburbs, which get bought up and developed, aren't enough. And they're really disconnected, and species just need bigger spaces in order to move around and find mates and find food and that sort of thing. And so we have to have a mindset shift where we're not seeing ourselves as apart from nature, but we really need to be supporting the ecosystem right in our backyards. And so he has started a program called Homegrown National Park. I'll link to it below, where he's trying to get people excited about exploring nature right in their backyard. And so, and he's an entomologist, so he studies insects, and he's especially worried about the demise of pollinators, because we really need pollinators. And eventually, going along the same way we're going now, it's going to redound very badly to us, to future generations. So we need to do something now about it. We have to start changing our thinking and our attitudes. And where I live, which is a really developed area in the Washington metropolitan area, I mean, it's so sad the way people are, the way they use lawn and landscape maintenance companies, and they just come by and they don't do anything. They're not gardeners. They just come in to mow, and then they just throw down pesticides or herbicides to get rid of the weeds, and they spray for mosquitoes, which is really ineffectual anyway, and it poisons all these other insects and eventually baby birds. And then they throw down these petroleum-based fertilizers, and that gets washed into the streams, which goes into where I am, the Chesapeake Bay, and it causes all sorts of algae blooms. And I mean, it's terrible. What we do with our lawns is really, really destructive, and we're just clueless. We're just oblivious, and we're very, very conformist about how our lawns have to look, and it's just truly a social construct. And so he's trying to change our thinking. So I'm just going to go a little bit into the summary. This is chapter 11. He cites all sorts of studies all through, it's very evidence-based. He says what each of us can do, and this is a summary. He gives a quote from Wendell Berry. "There is in fact no distinction between the fate of the land and the fate of the people. When one is abused, the other suffers." So we have to first of all recognize that what we're doing is abusive, and that it's going to have very bad consequences for us in the future. But anyway, he talks about his Homegrown National Park, this idea he has, and here are 10 concrete steps that everybody can take. So I'm just going to do it real quick. Shrink your lawn. You don't need, he says, don't think of your lawn as a wall-to-wall carpet. Think of it as an area rug. If you need some space for kids to run around in, or, where you can sit out in chairs or whatever, that's great. But just make it that area, and then surround it with native plantings. So remove invasive species. We have a terrible problem here It's really kind of frightening just how many invasive species we have, because what happens is, it's a complicated thing. The deer, we have an overpopulation of deer. They overbrowse, that kills all the native stuff. And then these species that we've brought in, usually because of our landscaping, starts to take over, and they simply do not support the ecosystem. They don't feed the insects, or the pollinators, and the bees, and the birds and stuff. So it's just, so eventually they become like a monoculture because nothing can stop them. And what we need is biodiversity. Biodiversity supports more life. And so it just kind of smothers everything. And it's a real problem, and people are waking up very, very slowly. The invasive species are growing faster than people are dealing with it. So he's trying to get the word out, So remove invasive species from your property. Plant keystone genera. So there are certain plants that really support a lot of life and help other plants. The number one thing in the eastern United States is oak tree, especially the white oak tree. It supports so many, so many critters. But he says, go to your native plant finder. There's a website, I can link that below, and find out what's native for your area and what kind of life it supports, and then try to plant those plants. Then the fourth thing is be generous with your plantings. Plant a lot. Don't just do an isolated thing and an isolated thing over here, and just plant a lot. Like trees, a lot of people just want one tree, but you really need a stand of trees, because then the tree roots entangle and they won't blow over in the wind as easily. That's one of the problems that we do with landscaping, is we don't put in enough trees. So anyway, so think about planting as much as you can. Plant for specialist pollinators. So there's a lot of pollinators that evolve just to pollinate certain types of plants, like maybe like with a funnel cup flower and that sort of thing. Honeybees and bumblebees are generalists, but there's scads and scads of native pollinators that really need the flowers and the native plants that they evolved with. And so try to support them by planting specific plants for them. Let's see, network with neighbors. Try to get the word out. This is where I have a hard time. Try to get all the neighbors involved if you can. Build a conservation hardscape. So another thing is, what we do is we don't support other things like frogs, toads, little creatures, that they eat mosquitoes, and they're part of the ecosystem too. So think about them. Let's see. Create caterpillar pupation sites under your trees. And that just means leave your leaves there around your tree, because those fallen leaves are where the caterpillars generally pupate. And so if you leave them alone, if you don't mow over them, or you don't rake them up and throw them away or something, then the caterpillars can emerge, and that's food for baby birds. Baby birds starve to death because their parents, they can't find enough food for them to eat. And baby birds live mostly on caterpillars because they're soft, but they're very, very nutritious. So let's see, do not spray or fertilize. Don't spray or fertilize. It's so bad. It's really, really bad. And he has a simple way, and I'll link to it, a simple way to get rid of mosquitoes by having like a larva trap in your backyard. It's non-toxic. It's simple to do. I do it in my backyard. And it's more effective than spraying, and it's for mosquitoes, and it doesn't poison anything else. So educate your neighborhood civic association. That's where I have the most trouble. Okay, that was it. Anyway, it's a very edifying book. It is not a hard read. He's very compelling. I implore you to go to the website and check it out. It is an important thing, and it's something why I find it so meaningful is it's something I can actually do. There's so many things going on in the world, and I can't do anything about it. But this, I can do something about. I can actually help. I can actually contribute by just, thinking a little bit differently about my yard and changing my habits a little bit. And that's it. It's very enjoyable because I love watching nature, and you get to, it's enriching, and it's edifying, and it's absorbing, and connecting with nature. He mentions, there's studies that say that we're nowadays we are sky high with anxiety and depression, and yet there's documentation that being out in nature helps that. And so we need to connect with nature instead of being as alienated from it the way we are. So I'll put links down below, and hopefully, look them up and see what you think. Okay, so that was it. Nature's Best Hope. I finished that, I think, on Sunday. And then just last night, I finished, what did I do with it? Oh yeah, I finished Commodore Hornblower. So this was for Hornblower 2023. And I'm reading through all the Hornblower books. I'm starting in January, started with the first, and we're going through until November. So there are 11 books in this series. This is number 8. And I really like this one. I liked it better than the last one, what was it called? Flying Colors. And that was the last one in the original trilogy. But I actually really had a hard time getting through that one and did not like it. I thought I didn't like the plot. But this one was really good. So he's now Commodore of a fleet in the Baltic. And what Forster did, I found this really interesting because I actually looked it up. Most of the book is about the siege of Riga in 1812. So this is towards the end of the Napoleonic Wars, and Napoleon has invaded Russia, and he's trying to get to Moscow and St. Petersburg, which are like the two capitals. And St. Petersburg is much, in the western part of Russia, and so close to Europe. And I guess that part is considered Europe, but you know what I mean. It's so the Napoleon's forces have to get across the river at Riga to get into St. Petersburg. So they siege Riga, and Riga is really fighting desperately. And Hornblower gets involved, which my husband is saying, kudos to Forster to have a Navy story where it's set in the land war. But he actually uses the naval ships, and then he uses the Navy ships a couple of times, and then there's a really compelling scene where he's actually in fighting a battle. So I thought it was really good. It came out in 1945, and it's so patriotic. I really think that Forster was really seeing Napoleon as sort of the Hitler type, and how the English, were fighting so hard against Hitler, who had seemed to taken over all of Europe, and how isolated England must have felt at that time. Well, of course, we came in eventually, but at first they were really isolated, and I could really see parallels to that in this book. So it was a really interesting book. I was a page turner. I just read it in a few days. Yes, I really enjoyed this one. I enjoyed the whole setting, the whole historical setting. I thought it was really well done. So, all right, so now those were the 2 books. So now let me quickly tell you what I'm reading now. I started reading We Didn't Mean to Go to Sea. This is the Swallows in Amazon series that I've slowly been working through over the past few years. This is book number 7, I think. Yes, this is book number 7. I thought I was going to start it earlier in the summer, and I didn't. But I just started. I just have read the first couple of chapters. It's delightful. Once again, we're with John, Susan, Titty, and Roger Walker, these 4 children, and it's always about sailing. I'm doing a lot of stuff about sailing. I really am. Because Hornblower was all about the Napoleonic Wars and the Navy. This is about sailing. So I just started that. And then I'm still trying to work through this. I started this the day after Easter. I thought it was going to take me 50 days. I'm still working through it. It's just a slow read. It's so profound. He is so, it's deeply philosophical and theological. And I can only read a few pages at a time. And then I just have to sit and think about it. I mean, I've been taking notes and just, you know, it's almost like a meditation for me. I don't know. Am I going to finish it in September? I hope so. I'm on page 297 and it ends, what's the last page? 359. So I hope that I finish this before the end of September so I can start this other book that I've had in the wings that I've been wanting to start and haven't gotten to yet. And then the last, well, there's two other books on my Kindle. One is, I was going to show you the cover of Nature's Best Hope. Do you want to see the cover of Nature's Best Hope? Here we go. Come on. Oh, no. Oh, wait a second, I hit the wrong thing. I always hit the wrong thing, always. Let's see. Come on, come on. Oh, there we go. Nature's Best Hope. Okay, so good book. But I'm also reading, I also started to read this book that my husband wanted me to read. So during Jane Austen July, all I did was slowly read Sense and Sensibility. It was a reread. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was very leisurely, and I just enjoyed it. But for some reason, my husband started reading Jane Austen. He's read Jane Austen before. So he read Persuasion and I think Northanger Abbey. But then during Jane Austen July, I love to watch other people's videos on Jane Austen, and Chelsea at the Time Wanderer, Voyages of the Time Wanderer, did a review of this book, The Other Bennet Sister. So I'm not really a big fan of the fan fiction or the spin-offs of Jane Austen books. At one time, I sort of was more into it, even though I was never that into it. But I did read some. But that was a long time ago. Like, in my 30s, I was really into Jane Austen. And, like, for about 10 years, I was, like, mad about Jane Austen. And I read everything I could get my hands on. And I still love her very much. But I'm not at that level of enthusiasm anymore. So I'm not a big... I don't read a lot of spin-offs or whatever. Anyway, so but Chelsea talked about this book so highly, I mentioned it to him, and he got intrigued, so he read it. And he had a lot of trouble with it, and he had a lot of questions, and he wanted me to read it so that we could discuss it. So I said, okay, when I'm done reading what I'm reading, I will read The Other Bennet Sister. Well, I started reading it a few nights ago, and I can't get into it. So I'm trying to figure out what my problem is with it, because, you know, I don't know why I'm having so much trouble. I think it's that, first of all, it makes me miss Pride and Prejudice. I want to go back and reread Pride and Prejudice, which I haven't read for a few years, to focus more on the relationships between the sisters. But I think the second thing was, I think I was expecting it to be funnier. It's not funny at all. It's very angsty. And Mary isn't quite Mary. So, and I think the problem is that when Jane Austen created this character, she had a different project. Mary was there to be a foil or to show how dysfunctional the family was. And she was kind of a comical figure, right? But in this, it's just told from Mary's point of view, and it's very angsty and sad, and I just wish the author had, like, maintained Mary's character from Jane Austen, but still made it like that you felt sorry for her, that she was sensitive. But instead, she's kind of changed her. And so it doesn't have the sparkle. And I know that spin-offs can't have the sparkle because nobody writes like Jane Austen. But I guess I'm just not that interested in this author's project for Mary. So I don't know, but I think I want to read it because it did get my husband interested in Mary Wollstonecraft. How do you say her name? Wollstonecraft and Mary Shelley, because I mean, I don't want to spoil, but I think that Mary sort of comes into her own, and I think it's kind of a feminist thing. Anyway, I'm just not that into it, and I'm torn because my husband wanted me to read it so we could discuss it, and I'm just not that interested, and I would rather read something else, because there's this book I'm reading on my Kindle that I started reading months ago called Trampling Out the Vintage, and it's a history of the United Farm Workers. And I found it fascinating. I'm interested in labor history, and it's like a history of the 20th century, but through the lens of labor. And I'm fascinated by the character of Cesar Chavez, because it's got a little bit of Catholic history in it too. And it's just very well written. It's very, very fact laden, and just it's every year what happened, the developments and the different events and the strikes and the marches and stuff. And I was really enjoying it. And I got up to 39%. It's 848 pages. So it's like a long, very fact-laden history. So those things take me forever to read. But I would like to get back to it. I was thinking it's Labor Day, and I don't want to DNF this book, but just like a couple of months ago, I got off track. So that's what the more the mood I'm in. Instead of reading The Other Bennett Sister, I really just want to sort of get back into reading this book. So what should I do? Should I humor my husband and read The Other Bennett Sister and then go back to it? Or should I just save The Other Bennett Sister maybe for later? Maybe for Fabrigency or something. I don't know. I asked my husband. He said, I'm not going to make you read a book you don't want to read. I don't know, but I don't want to hurt his feelings. So I don't know what to do. I'm torn about that. I would like, in September though, I really would like to get back to Trampling Out the Vintage and reading about the history of the United Farm Workers. It was really interesting, and I probably won't finish reading it until into October or November, so it could count for the fourth quarter of Historathon. And then the other thing that I'm reading right now is I'm reading this to the 7-year-old grandson, The Toothpaste Millionaire. I'd forgotten how good this book is. It really is good. He's learning like business terms. And what's nice about it, and I'd forgotten this too, is it's about a young white girl who moves into a black neighborhood and how she makes friends with Rufus. So there's a little bit, it's not heavy-handed whatsoever, but there's a little bit of that in there, which is good. And it's comical and well told, and I'm really enjoying it. We really like it. Okay, so now I want to, finish these books in September. I want to finish this and this in September. But then what I plan to read for the fictions that I want to read are, I have to read this, the next book in the Hornblower. So that's going to be at the end of the month. I started to read Dr. Wardle's School, and I want to get back to it, and I want to read that in September. For Historathon for this third quarter, I haven't done anything. The first 2 quarters, I read these really long historical books, like history books, and they kind of burned me out. So this quarter, I'm taking it easy, and this is also about boats and sailing. I'm going to reread this book. I read it ages ago, Longitude. I don't know why I have such a nice copy, but I do. It's even signed. Where did I pick that up? Anyway, so I have this book, Longitude, and it's nice and short. I was reminded of this by Mark at Booktime with Elvis. It was on his recommendations for the third quarter of Historathon. And so I'm going to read this for Historathon. And then Mitzi at Mitzi Reads and Writes is doing a read of Nancy Drew. She's going back and reading Nancy Drew. And I got this. This is actually The Secret of the Old Clock, and then it's also The Hidden Staircase. And these are the 2 books that I remember reading as a child. I don't know if I read other ones, but I really remember reading these. The funny thing is my husband did a little bit of research because he said, when I said to him, I'm going to read Nancy Drew, he said, those books are so racist, aren't they? And I was like, oh, I don't remember that. But he said that his brother had read all the Hardy Boys, and then in adulthood, when he went back to read the Hardy Boys, he was shocked at how racist they were. So what happened with Nancy Drew is it was first came out in 1938, I think is when they started publishing them. And then people started complaining. And in 1959, so in the 50s, they were complaining about how, so they rewrote them and they made them much shorter. So you can tell whether it's a new or old edition by how long it is. Apparently, the new ones that were cleaned up are like 180 pages typically around. These are just formula written books. They just churned them out like it was pure, nothing, pop for your brain or whatever. What am I trying to say? Candy for your brain. So not good literature. I don't know if Mitzi's going to be disappointed or not, but I got this one, and this is the cleaned up version. If you get the older vintage ones, it's not cleaned up. So I don't know. But I bought these, and maybe I'll read along with Mitzi. I was a little bit chagrined when I heard that. At least they cleaned them up, but they're really not written well, apparently. Anyway, and then the other thing is if I finish this introduction to Christianity, I'm going to start on my Thomas Merton, The Seven-Story Mountain, which I've been wanting to read. I thought I was going to read it this summer. I haven't gotten to it yet because I want to finish this first. This is going to be lighter reading because this is just his memoir. And this is, I read chunks of it as a younger person in my 20s, and then I've been wanting to reread it for years, and I finally got a copy. So yeah, so is that everything? I feel like I forgot something. I think that's everything. Yeah, so I've talked a lot. I'm sorry, but I tried to cram a lot in. So I hope you're doing well. I hope you have a good, oh, I forgot something. It's in the mail. I'm getting an edition of Cymbeline, the story of Cymbeline by Shakespeare. So that's my one participation in Shake-Timber. And that's inspired by the story of Cymbeline, which is written by Emma Stewart, who's the bookish princess. And she wrote 2 charming books about her kitten. And I think she's working on a 3rd. And that inspired me because when I saw that, I thought, oh, that is one Shakespeare play I've never read. I don't know anything about it. So that's what I'm going to get. But I had to order it, so it hasn't come in yet. So I think that's it. I really do. I'm losing my train of thought, as usual. So, all right. Well, I hope you're doing well. I hope that you make it through Labor Day, and happy Labor Day safely, and, have a good family time. And that, starting out with school is going well for you, and wherever you are in your life, I hope September is wonderful. All right, I will talk to you later. Bye-bye.